Well, welcome everyone. I'm Janice Ross, WiT President and Managing Partner for Brand Fresh Management. Thank you guys all for joining us today for this very important conversation around allyship. To start things off, I thought I would share why allyship matters to me. As in my role as WiT President, I've had the opportunity to meet and get to know a diverse and talented group of amazing women in the WiT community. In our conversations, I've learned so much more about allyship and the tremendous and positive impact that it can have on all of us. So to share my why, I want to be part of creating a community where we all belong, both personally and professionally, where everyone feels heard, valued, respected, and that they can show up as their authentic self. My hope for everyone listening today is that if you haven't already, it's that you find your why. So today, we're going to hear from industry leaders that are deeply committed to allyship. I want to welcome them now. Sascha King, Senior Director of Talent Acquisitions and Employee Experience at Spin Master. Wolfe Pereira, CEO at Encantos. Sara Rosales, SVP of Communications at Jazwares. Terri Nichelle Bradley, CEO Brown Toy Box. Bisma Ansari, SVP at Mega and Global Head of Construction Toys at Mattel. And Vlachos, EVP of Hardline and Retail at ViacomCBS. I also want to just share that we put this program together in partnership with Michelle Bogan at Equity at Work. Unfortunately, Michelle can't join us today because of a family matter. Shannon Varcoe, our amazing program manager, will be moderating today. And so I'm going to turn it over to her now so she can get us started. So Shannon.
Thanks so much, Janice. Appreciate it. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today and being a part of this conversation. We so appreciate you taking the time to join us. And we want to invite everyone to, in the busyness of everything, the holidays are coming up, just to be present with us for this next hour, kind of remove distractions, turn off any notifications you might have, and just kind of tune in and be here with us and interact a little bit too. And so kind of the first opportunity for interaction is I would love to, have everyone who's here join in with the chat with kind of sharing your why, as Janice mentioned. So what is your personal why for taking action as an ally as we start this conversation? And we'd really love to kind of hear your thoughts on that, whether it's now or, even throughout the time that we have here on Zoom together, to just kind of reflect and share about what your why might be when it comes to taking action as allies. And so before we get started with our kind of first segment with our speakers, I think it's really important for us to kind of think about what is the importance of allyship when it comes to our industry, our work, our community. And it's so important for us to be taking the time to support others and, really think about the impact that we individually want to have, which comes to that why, as Janice mentioned. And I'll share too my own as, program manager for WiT. I found that my why when it comes to allyship is in creating the programs that we do. I know we had so many participants, and I see a lot of names that I recognize who participated in our Empower Days programs, and how we in WiT might be able to create programs or opportunities for conversations like the one we're having today, but also opportunities for people in the industry to get involved in other ways, like the Empower Days program or our webinars, and just really creating that inclusive and welcoming community for everyone who participates with things with WiT. And so that's a big part of my why and why I'm here to moderate this today and with all of our amazing speakers. But before we jump in, I also want to kind of give us an opportunity to set a standard of what allyship is and why we're having this conversation to begin with. And we're going to kick it off with a video from the Lean In Allyship at Work program. And we found many resources to be really useful around allyship, but this one in particular is an incredible resource for exploration and understanding of allyship in action at work. And the program that they've put together and all of the materials that they've shared freely for everyone. They've used a tool in designing it with a really strong intersectional lens to address the inequalities that are impacting traditionally marginalized groups. And we just really think this video is a great primer for the conversations we're going to be having today. And so with that, I'm going to kind of share this video so everyone can get a chance to see it. And we will go from there with our conversation. Give me 1 second to transition over to that. All right, there we go.
You may have heard of allyship, but research shows that most of us don't really understand what allyship is. So let's start with the definition. Allyship is an active and consistent effort to use your privilege and power to support and advocate for people with less privilege. Let's unpack that. Our society is set up in ways that prioritizes some groups over others. For example, a restaurant might be easy to navigate for a person without a disability, but much harder for someone who uses a wheelchair. These patterns show up in our workplaces too. Studies show that leaders are more likely to mentor people who remind them of themselves. And since most leaders are white men, that means it's often easier for white men to find mentors.
Allyship involves understanding inequities like these and taking concrete steps to help level the playing field. This is a key point. To show up as allies, we have to take action. Sometimes taking action feels tricky or even uncomfortable, but not acting can be more harmful than we realize. It can send a signal that we're not aware of the injustices around us, or that we think they're okay, or even that we don't care. So if you're not sure what to do, ask yourself, is there an action I can take that is responsible, even if it's not perfect? If so, do that. Allyship isn't about getting any one action perfectly right. It's about acting consistently in ways that add up over time. This is another key point. Allyship is consistent. We might be moved to practice allyship toward a specific group when injustice is in the news, but to really make a difference, we need to commit to pushing for change over the long term. Now, let's look at the last piece of the definition. Allyship is about supporting and advocating for people with less privilege. That might mean speaking up when you see inequity, like pointing out that the women on your team are often interrupted in meetings. It could also mean working proactively to make things fairer. For example, you could research best practices for reducing bias in hiring and share what you learn with your team. As you're practicing allyship, it's important to stay focused on the people you're supporting and the impact you want to have.
Staying focused on impact isn't always easy. We sometimes end up focusing too much on how our actions make us look or feel. When this happens, we can slip into what's called a savior mentality. We might start pushing for solutions that sound right to us instead of listening to people with less privilege and following their lead. We can also end up practicing performative allyship, which means we're acting based on how we want to be perceived. For example, we might post on social media about the importance of supporting people of color, but not speak up when we hear racist comments in our daily lives. On the other hand, some of the most powerful allyship actions are the ones almost no one sees, like privately recommending a colleague with a traditionally marginalized identity for a promotion. Allyship isn't always easy or straightforward, and you won't get it right all the time, but it's so important that you continue to try because allyship really matters. By showing up as an ally, you can help people with traditionally marginalized identities feel included at work. Research also shows that allyship can have positive ripple effects. When employees see their colleagues acting as allies, they're more likely to step up too. This means that by practicing allyship, you can motivate others and shift your company's culture in a way that promotes equity. And when workplaces are more equitable, employees of all identities are happier and more committed to their jobs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So with that, we also want to get started with our first segment and our first speaker. So I can see why we love that video so much and what it is used for kind of getting us started with this conversation. I think there's so many great points in there that we'll be getting to as we continue this conversation today. But I'd like to invite Sascha and Stephen to join as we begin talking about the importance of learning and growing as individuals when we are allies. And so Stephen, Sascha, thanks so much for joining us today and being a part of this. And so I want to kick us off with just a kind of open question of how does allyship show up in your own daily lives and within your own spheres of influence? So either one, go ahead and get us started.
Sascha, why don't you kick us off?
Oh,
you're on
Sascha,
mute.
you're on mute. Sorry.
I had to be the first one,
Pandemic.
certainly.
Okay.
Thanks, Shannon and Stephen. Glad to have this conversation. That was a very good video that I think helped summarize a lot of the things that we all think about on a regular day-to-day basis. So to answer the first question, of course, like how does allyship appear in my day-to-day life? For those that don't know me, I am the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition and Employee Experience at Spin Master. So in my role in talent acquisition, we are a direct conduit from the outside world to the company. And as a team, we prioritize building a company that reflects our community and our values. So from the talent acquisition perspective, diverse and inclusive hiring practices are continuously at the forefront of our discussions. And it's within our realm to influence decision makers and hiring leaders and the organization as a whole. It's our job to advocate for candidates as they go through our process and work with the teams that participate in our interview panels to remind people of their unconscious bias and how to be a better ally. But from the employee experience perspective, it's one thing to attract talent, and then it's another to create an inclusive environment of belonging that helps people feel safe in their space once they've joined the organization, and ultimately it leads to a space they want to stay at long term.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And I think it makes so much sense too with the way that it works with your role. And I think you mentioned so many key things there too, to highlight around, how are we from the beginning of the process of somebody joining and participating even in the hiring process, to also when they are an employee. But Stephen, I want to pass it to you for anything to add from your perspective too.
Sure. So for those of you that don't know me, Stephen Wolfe Pereira, I'm a proud Dominican American, born and raised in New York, but now living in LA. And I'm the co-founder of Encantos. We're a global creator platform, which is focused on getting creators from around the world to help kids learn 21st century skills. And, as a Dominican growing up in New York, I feel like I've been on this journey for over 25 years now, where, probably when I got out of school, allyship wasn't really a term. But when you really think about all the different roles that you have, you think about your actions. I think it got to a point in my life where I was really tired of hearing a lot of people talk about allyship, where you saw a lot of folks kind of do their Instagram posts like they talked about in the video. Mm-hmm. And ultimately that culminated in me starting a company which truly had diversity, equality, inclusion in the DNA of the company as we founded it, because it was two Latino families that came together to start this company. And we are on a mission to democratize, diversify, and personalize learning on global scale to impact 2 billion kids. So when you talk about allyship, there are ways that companies think about, kind of tack it on to what they do. But when you found a company, when you build it thoughtfully from the ground up, where this is actually injected into the DNA, and everything that we do is from that lens of diversity, equality, inclusion, it's a radical shift in how you hire, the creators that we're bringing onto the platform, the voices that aren't heard, the stories that aren't told. And my wish is that we find a way to have allyship to be a part of everyday actions, because over time, that's the consistent action that will break through.
Absolutely. And I think it's so interesting to hear both of you kind of talk about it from this larger lens and this larger impact. And also it made me think too about, the importance of sort of the just individual and our own roles as individuals, but then also that the role that we take to be able to provide impact at a larger scale. But I'm curious for either of you, as as an individual person, how have you seen your role as an ally or having allies for yourselves kind of impact your own life or in your own kind of spheres in that way too?
Yeah, certainly. I think, as Stephen shared, I'm a Chinese Canadian woman, and I live in Toronto, which is a very multicultural city now, and I have the exposure to a lot of different groups. But having grown up in a very small, homogenous town, it was really challenging, of course, to express your individuality. And I think reflecting on where I am today, if it weren't for allies, again, and not a word that was familiar at that time, but probably wouldn't have led to the places that I am today, which I think is not only critical to how we all come together as a community, but I align much of it to my moral compass. When we talk about what does allyship mean, it's open-mindedness, it's learning, it's humility, it's all of those things. And I think, again, as the core of my being, those are the things that I want to put in the environment as well. So it's kind of a natural transition to help want to help people and have those uncomfortable conversations. I think that was a really poignant part of the video in what it means to be an ally on a day-to-day basis. It's not necessarily those grand gestures. It is in the everyday things that we do. It's having conversations that are uncomfortable. It's knowing when to shut up. It's knowing when to speak up when required for somebody else on their behalf if it's needed. And I think those things, every instance, every day, they together become very, very impactful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I would add, it's fascinating. I think people generally want to help, and there's this fear of stepping in it, right? You don't want to step on the landmine. You don't want to F up. I feel like it's really not about you, but think about the tools that you have around you. And I've been on this journey for, again, a long time. And when I tell people that I'm Dominican, people maybe look at me funny and they're like, well, they'll kind of whisper and they're like, well, you're not Black. And it's like, not everyone looks like Big Papi. There's a large diaspora out there of Latinos or, Chinese or, you pick the ethnicity. But, I feel like people generally want to help, and you could take whatever is within your domain expertise and find a way to help that way. One of the things that I started to do literally after the murder of George Floyd on June 12th last year, I started on LinkedIn a spotlight series, because I've now worked in numerous different industries, from financial services to media entertainment, advertising, technology. And I had just happened to know a lot of diverse talent, and the whole idea of, you can't find the talent, it's really hard, it's a pipeline, all that is bullshit. Right? Like, we all know the talent is out there. You may not know those circles, but the resources are out there, the people are out there. And all I started to do was post on LinkedIn and talk about consistency every day over, months. And that just kind of got this momentum where I had people reaching out saying, wow, this is amazing. I feel seen. I didn't know all this talent, existed out there. Executive recruiters coming to me saying, hey, can you help me meet this talent? I'm like, isn't that your job? Like, don't you have one job to do? So the point is, little things within your domain expertise, within your reach, you could do something. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could just start small, but make it consistent every day. Figure out, how are you going to be an ally? Ally is a verb, and you have to take action.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's so good. It's like a, say it again for the people in the back kind of moment of like, it doesn't have to be these big, giant, grand gestures, but I think it's about, what are the steps that we're taking, and what are the little steps that people can do to make allyship a verb. And I absolutely love that you said it that way, because I think that's why we're calling this allies in action, because you're really not an ally unless you're taking action in some way. But I think it doesn't have to be, a career change to, whatever it might, it's things like what you're doing, Stephen, of posting on LinkedIn and highlighting people, but with the intention, I think, that we can hear in the way that you talk about it, is that it's not about you, right? And it's not about what it looks like for you. And I think that was a big part of that video that I really appreciate, is that it's when we start to make it about what people think of us of being a bright, shiny ally, but it's more about like, what is the impact and what's the intention behind the way that we're doing it. Something I think about often is this idea of, it's not about being right, but it's about getting it right, and in learning and kind of having that posture toward curiosity and being open to learning. And I think in the things that you're doing, right, is that you don't have to be perfect at it, but you're doing it and you're being consistent. So,
but if I may, I also feel that there's a responsibility that, it goes in a couple of different dimensions. One is that you feel uncomfortable. The other is you have a voice. The action, the allyship is literally you raising your voice. And so it doesn't matter. You don't have to be the CEO of a company. You don't have to found the company. I mean, look at all the great work that Sascha's doing to kind of make sure that you have diverse slates. When you're looking for a role, you're making sure that you're considering women and people of color. You know what? Look around your company, call people out. Call out the CEO, ask it in that town hall meeting. Like, that is part of the candid conversation. And when you think of folks like, Dion, at ViacomCBS, think about, the work that he's doing to really make sure that there's representation in every single line of business. And it's not an HR thing. I want to be very clear. Diversity is a business imperative. You have to make this about the business, and it cannot be relegated to D&I. It can't be an HR thing. It's at every level of people that are in business decision-making roles. So use your voice.
I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, as much as we want to create perhaps resources and policies, it's not for us to push out to everyone. Everyone has to be an active participant in that. And even to go back to what you were speaking about with regards to talent, there is so much talent out there, and it's very easy to stay very linear in the talent that you look for and the very direct experience. And again, people who kind of mirror your experience and your extracurricular activities, all of those things. So it is our job to remind people of the potential that's out there, to decouple from your biases and be open-minded to meeting all of those people. Maybe what talent looks like isn't how you perceived it initially. So as long as you're open-minded to the conversations and input from a variety of people around you, it's to the benefit of the business. We all know that diversity is just a smart business decision.
Yeah. But Shannon, there was one of the questions in the chat saying, well, what if your voice isn't heard? And I want to be clear, oftentimes the voice might not be heard, right? You might feel like you deserve a promotion. You might feel like, licensing is really important, but licensing isn't prioritized at the company. There's so many examples. Diversity is just one of many. So how would you get your voice heard for something that isn't about diversity, right? That isn't about equity? I feel like finding strength in numbers, finding other people that also feel the same way. And by the way, being vocal about it. The power is with the people, the power is with the employees, and there is strength in numbers. So I promise you can find ways that you have other allies to get that message heard. And if folks don't hear, maybe you're at the wrong company. Maybe that doesn't align with your purpose and your values. And you talk about the Great Resignation. Now is a time for you to really be purpose-driven. How do you want to spend your time on this planet? That is about impact. And I would want to be at a place where my voice would be heard.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree and appreciate that too. And I think that, thinking through Stacey, thanks for asking that question, because I think it really gets to a good point of, it doesn't have to always be, like we're saying, it's taking action in a way of getting your voice heard or having a conversation or, reaching out to somebody, but also really it's about like, where are you aligning your values with the work that you're doing and the organizations that you're participating in. And so I think it's important that we bring that up as well. Well, Stephen, Sascha, we could talk with both of you for a whole hour about this, and I would love to sometime for sure. But definitely need to move us along to our next segment, where we're going to talk a little bit about, this importance of being allies, but also about receiving allyship. And so Stephen, Sascha, thanks so much. Appreciate you both. We'll see you at the end. But want to invite Terri and Sara to join me as we talk about kind of this vulnerable side of allyship, where sometimes we need an ally. Oftentimes we need an ally, and it's so important to be an ally to others, but also how might we, engage with people to be active allies for us. And so want to kind of toss that up to you, Terri and Sara. Thanks so much for joining in this part of the conversation.
Sure, happy to be here. I'll jump in first, Terri. I think throughout my career, I have been very, very fortunate in finding allies who have supported me and have helped grow me in my career. And in some instances, I didn't even really know what to call them. They were not necessarily mentors. They were not necessarily, allies, which is a term that's being used now. But when I reflect, and I was thinking about this panel and joining you guys, I thought, wow, I've been very lucky to have allies, and in many instances, male allies more so than female allies, which was also an aha moment as I reflected back. But I think that anyone who helps challenge you and who helps you think differently and who helps you get out of your comfort zone and can be an advocate for you is an ally. And when you find people who are supporting you in that way, and you can then seek them out and say, okay, do we share the same goals? Do we have the same values? Are we coming from a very, similar perspective? And they can be peers, they can be junior to you, they can certainly be, people that are senior to you, they can be, people in WiT that you align with that can help you then find your voice, and they can have your back when you need it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Terri, I'll pass it over to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so over the course of my career, I have had allies, or I really think of these folks as co-conspirators, right? Like co-conspirators with the shared mission, with the shared vision, with shared moral compass, right? And they've shown up as mentors, advisors, and advocates in 3 different buckets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very upfront and transparent when I reach out to these folks about what I need and what I'm looking for, but I feel empowered to do that because how I show up as an ally to others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's also important to just kind of level set and remember that folks receiving allyship are also giving allyship as well, right?
Okay.
And so I think we kind of heard that from Steve and Sascha. I'm sorry, from Steve and Sascha saying that they also they were giving and receiving, right? So I think that's really important that we always level set, because sometimes it can feel as though it's a charitable thing, right? And it's not, right? It's one of those things where, as Sascha said, it makes good business sense. But I'm very transparent. I look at where we have gaps, right? Where I have gaps, where I haven't had the generational benefit of having access to certain rooms or networks or resources. And then I just reach out to my network and I say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm very comfortable being very vulnerable and saying, this is an area that I don't feel as strong in, and I leverage those folks in my network to kind of help me navigate that. I've got some amazing women, men, some older folks and some younger folks that have really shown up in my life in really amazing ways, and that have really kind of transformed my business and really empowered me as a woman to just kind of go after the things that I want.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. And that is so why we have both of you on this panel for sure. And I think, Terri, I'm so inspired by that, of your, I think the ability to be vulnerable about what you don't know, I think can be really difficult for people. I know I have a hard time with that, kind of wanting to create this air of, we know what we're doing, or we have it all together. I hate that term, but it's a term that's out there. And it's, but it does take that serious vulnerability of saying, hey, I don't actually know what I'm doing here, and I need help. And so I think hearing you have that confidence, where did you get that from? How did you get that? And, where does that come from? And how have you grown in that ability to ask for help?
Yeah, once you hit 40, you don't care anymore. You just say the things, right? So there's that.
Yeah.
But I also think it comes from being a Black girl, now woman, being raised in St. Paul, Minnesota in the 70s and 80s, right? You develop a thick skin. You develop this sense of, this is who I am, and I'm very comfortable in my skin. My business is all about, Brown Toy Boxes is really all about making Black children feel very comfortable in their skin and feel empowered and know that they can be and achieve anything. So who am I to not act in that same kind of manner, right? So I think for me, that being vulnerable can be very scary, right? Because what's always in the back of your head is, I don't want to confirm, if I think that people don't think I know this, I don't want to confirm that I don't know these things, right? Mm-hmm. That's why it's important that you curate a group of folks that want to see you win. And that's what I have in my circle. So I've been very deliberate. Listen, I'm a LinkedIn queen. A lot of my network has been built through LinkedIn, right? And I've just kind of reached out, and I don't go in with an ask. I go in just trying to see if there's any commonalities beyond the work, but commonalities in how we, approach life, how we approach our work, those kind of things. And when I find that, I'll say, hey, can I ask you something, right? And just give them a little bit and see how they do with that bit of vulnerability. And then when I see that there's someone that I can trust with that, then, we have that, but it's also got to be two-sided, right? I need them to be so comfortable asking me things, because I don't want it to feel as though it's this maternalistic, paternalistic relationship, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're pouring into me, but not realizing that I have a value that I can share back with you. And when people approach it that way, that's when it feels safe to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly true, Terri. And I will also add that it takes time to cultivate that network. It doesn't happen overnight, and you can't just say, oh, these 10 people, I want them to be my allies. Right. So like any relationship, it is a two-way street. It is a two-way dialogue, and finding the opportunity to then give back or to support when they are in need is really how you can create that strong network and create those allies that are going to be there for you, and you're going to be there for them. But it does take time. It doesn't happen that quickly.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think you're right that it's not about, saying, all right, these people who are the people who I want to be allies, right? But it's about finding them. And I think so many, for myself too, the allies that I found in my life have been people that maybe I've been an ally to start, right? And so I think it's so much of that give and take, but and seeing opportunities where we can be allies to others, and it's like we love, like I think there's such a love of being an ally when you can be, and I think it's also giving people the gift of being an ally to you, is another way that kind of helps me think about it in that way. If it's not just about taking or asking for help or needing something. I think Terri said that way. If it's not just about, hey, give me this, but it's what can we do together, and how can I help be an ally to you too. I'm curious from both of your perspectives too about what about when there's been maybe somebody who like could have been an ally to you but didn't show up as one in a way that maybe you needed them to be. Did you kind of address that? Is there an experience maybe related to that, or how can we let people know when maybe they could be a better ally to us if they weren't?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly has happened to me many times in my career. And I think I think it's important to address it. So Steve kind of talked about those uncomfortable conversations, right? And that's one of those things that if you approach that conversation with love, right? Like, I don't think this was your intention, but this is how it made me feel, right? So I think it's important to be able to address those things so it doesn't happen again, not only to you, but to someone else. I know there have been times when people have tried to be allies to me, and they will go in a room and really I'm asking, and I think part of that is the person's responsibility too. Am I asking you to help me get into the room? Am I asking you to speak on my behalf? Do I need you to share my story, or do I want to share my story, right? So it's kind of having that conversation in advance. And sometimes when the other person shares your story, you're like, when you listen, you're like, oh, that's not quite who I am or what my story is. So just making sure that you're very clear. And then when it's off, being able to say, hey, let's have this conversation, and make sure that it, and like I said, if it's grounded in love and respect, then it won't be a bad conversation. But sometimes it is very difficult, right? And you just don't want to have it because that they had the best intentions. It just didn't come out the right way, or didn't come off the right way. So it really is important that you do address it, so that it's not something that comes up again, because then that's your responsibility if you allow that to continue to happen.
That's exactly right. It is your responsibility, Terri, well said. And I think when you're very junior in your career, those conversations are very difficult to have. And I know personally, I probably let a lot of things slide because I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know, I could tell it wasn't ill-intended, but at the same time, it was disrespectful, or, you felt slighted in whatever way. So I do think as you find your voice and you come from it from that perspective of respect and trust and love, I love that you added that word, you can have those difficult conversations. And I think sometimes, they've got their own stuff that they're dealing with. And so they're not thinking about you, per se, but, speak up. I think that really is the only thing that, you can do to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I appreciate, again, both of you sharing that so much, because I think it's interesting to kind of look at it from both sides there of how can we ask for better help, and ask for what we need. But then also when we are allies, like thinking about it in that way too, of how can we ask others what they need, and be able to also listen to those things when people ask for what they need. How do we listen and really hear people? And I think it comes back to even what Stephen and Sascha were talking about in that video too, is it's not about you as the ally, it's about actually creating the impact that you want to have. And if it's in helping somebody, you got to do it in the way that works for them. And I think you also have to help people be really good allies to you by asking for what you need. So, so appreciate that. Yeah. Great points. And so the last question I kind of have is, where do you think we might, or how might we get to having allyship be more of a practice amongst our community, our industry? Where do you see kind of the growth of where allyship can become more of a part of everything that we do? Big question.
Yeah, it is a big question, but I will say that I love the intentionality that I'm seeing, particularly in WiT, right? Like there's a lot of intentionality about how do we approach allyship in a way that's not performative, right? How do we do it with authenticity and intentionality? And I think if you approach this and with our industry or any other industry with those things, intentionality and authenticity, and understand that there are, you know, going back to Sascha's point, there is a business imperative to make sure that we center inclusion, right? Because we're leaving a lot of folks out of the conversation and we're leaving a lot of money off the table, right? On the table. And so I think it's a matter of making sure that you have diverse voices in the room, right? And not in a way, again, that is performative, and not in a way that is, you know, we just want you to validate what we're thinking, right? But also not in a way to teach all the time, because that's exhausting. It's exhausting to be the one that's always, well, this is what this means, and this is how this feels. And then, you know, what I personally do is I pull back, right? I'm like, I've had a tough day. I don't want to go on at 5 o'clock and teach somebody something, right? You know, and so I think it's really just being very conscious of, you know, how would you feel? And that's where the empathy comes in. Like, how would you feel if this were you, right? I think it's those things, you know, when you're going to industry events and you see someone kind of off by themselves sometimes. Now, I'm going to say this, and I don't want you guys to swarm people, but if you see somebody kind of off by themselves, make sure that you invite them into a conversation and kind of, you know, because it is, you know, there's not currently a lot of diversity in our industry, right? So if you see someone standing off by themselves and maybe looking a little uncomfortable, invite them over, have a conversation. It's like little things like that that really do make a difference. And so I just encourage everyone to just kind of think of, how would you feel? Like, what, if that were you, how would you feel? And if you approach all of these things with that in mind, then I think we're really going to get there.
Right. It's the basics of what you learned in kindergarten, right?
Yep.
Trying to include everyone in that sandbox. And I agree with you. It's not even like the big major things. Yes, speak up. If you hear something, speak up. If you see something, speak up. But oftentimes it's just small gestures. It's not grand gestures. And I think that when we communicate clearly, when we have an end goal in mind, you know, when we accept feedback and we give feedback, you know, I don't want to be the voice for every Latino in, you know, the universe, but I come from my own perspective and I listen. And I think when we connect with people who are curious and want to know more and are reading more and trying to understand more and trying to, you know, learn, I think their behavior also changes. They're more alert to disparities. And so that all, I think, you know, makes it a much more inclusive environment. And completely agree with you, Terri. Our industry is not very diverse. And I don't know that it's by intention, but I think when they see faces like Terri, when they see faces like mine, they're much more open to thinking about this industry as an option.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think both such great things from both of you. I appreciate every comment and your thoughts, because I think it's so true that it's this intentionality behind the way that we approach these conversations and the way that we approach this as an industry that are going to make the difference. And that it's again, it goes back to, we keep saying this, but it's about action, and it's about those actions, and they can be small actions of including someone in a conversation, or, you know, putting your hand up for somebody for you know, a workplace promotion, whatever it can be. Is it can be just in conversations or in interactions, and that interpersonal allyship is such a crucial part of what's going to move us all forward. So Terri, Sara, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, and just sharing your stories and your perspective are so crucial for us, and look forward to more conversations with both of you about this. But we're going to head into our kind of third segment, which is all about this business part of allyship. And so how does this relate into the corporate allyship side of things? And so I'll invite Dion and Bisma to join me as we talk a little bit more about kind of the corporate side of allyship. And, you know, because in the workplace, allies assist in making a stronger, more positive work environment and being valued members of the team. And so really curious for both of you to share a little bit about how your companies are equipping employees with tools and education that they might need to be really great allies. So Bisma, do you want to get us started there?
Sure. Happy to be here. Thanks, Shannon. So I think the first step for me that was really impactful of Mattel's action was really stating and sharing our point of view. That we are at our best. We believe we're at our best when when every single member of our team feels respected and included and heard. And for me, that they really set the frame up to say that allyship is in the center of what we want to do and how we want to act. And this is the frame on how we should move forward. And then coming out of it, it's about like those speaker series on various topics, including allyship. We had leadership trainings on conscious inclusion, which I think is such a great, an important piece on understanding our role in allyship. And then really amplifying ERGs, because these ERGs are like where consumers.
I'm gonna pause you there for ERGs. For people maybe who don't know, what's an ERG?
Employee. Good point.
Okay, yeah.
Employee resource group.
Employee resource group. Okay, great. Thank you. Continue.
Yes, on different topics where people can really feel like they belong. And I think all of these, provide different forms of education. It increases employees' knowledge, and as a company, I think it's important that we set that we're providing that solution to the employees, and I think that's really important. At the same time, we gain empathy. Employees gain empathy from these kind of things, and I think for me, it's like knowledge and empathy equals allyship. If I
Yes.
summarize it in a way. So yeah, I think those are the kind of two big ones. I think the last one I can point out is really creating a role and leadership roles that are just focused on DEI. I know Sascha and Stephen mentioned earlier, it absolutely is not just about HR or a role, but I think just highlighting the focus and the fact that it is such an important thing across the organization was another big moment to really state the importance of allyship and DEI in the company.
Absolutely. Bisma, thanks for sharing that. And I think we've got some comments in the chat too around ERG. So I appreciate you bringing those up as a great resource. And to get involved in ERGs that maybe you aren't necessarily, a part of that group and are a part of that, but are going there to learn, I think is really another really great aspect to those as an individual getting involved in some of the things that your company might be offering. But Dion, I'll pass it to you. I'd love to hear what's going on at ViacomCBS.
Great. Thanks, Shannon. Great to be here. Thanks to the WiT team for including me in the conversation. Hopefully my audio is okay still.
You're good.
Okay, good.
Great.
I loved what you said, Bisma. That to me summarizes it. The knowledge and empathy equals allyship, because that is absolutely so key to understanding where we navigate and what's important in this space. It's interesting, Bisma and I compared some notes ahead of this call because we have very similar corporate cultures and focus points, right? And these ERGs, these employee resource groups, are incredibly essential to our DNA of our company. I'll say here, I think it comes down to three things. I think number one, making sure that the education, that knowledge, and the open environments is part of the DNA of the company. We have in ViacomCBS, we have an Office of Global Inclusion that is focused on bringing the conversations to the table, bringing some really provocative and brave conversations to the table to make sure to heighten awareness for the full employee resource base. And then we have employee resource groups within to carry out mentorship and carry out as a resource for the whole company on a day-to-day basis. We have groups within that do that. I will say within those employee resource groups, for example, so I'm an executive sponsor of what was called a merge, and we now have called in our merger ViacomCBS Proud, which supports the LGBTQ community. One of our strongest board members is actually an ally. She's part of the community because she's an ally, and she uses her influence at Comedy Central and all that she's done in her career to help further conversations and help bring the inclusion and message of the LGBTQ community to our entire, in our entire audience, as well as our entire employee base. And I thought that was, when I was thinking about this today, one of the powerful messages that I entered this, group a long time, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and thought and always assumed, oh, my fellow board member is part of my community and so forth, and didn't realize, and it's like, she's a strong ally with empathy and passion around this subject and using that powerful seat and in a way to further that. And I really respected that. And of course, allies are part of those communities. So I'll start there. The other last thing that I want to just take as a piece that I loved, we were saying earlier, and it's something that Marva Smalls, who heads up our Office of Global Inclusion at ViacomCBS, said to me once in preparing for a conversation. Let's not focus on progress. I'm sorry, not focus on perfection. It's about progress, right? The team stated this earlier. We can't be afraid to make progress and move forward and be stifled or be stuck in the idea that we're not going to do it perfectly. We have to learn from our mistakes. We will step in it. We will mess up at times, but that's the only way progress can happen. And so I loved that conversation earlier today. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that progress over perfection, or the, not necessarily about getting it, or not about doing it right, but getting it right. And I think learning, always that kind of posture toward learning but still actionable. I think that's the piece that's so crucial. Is it's, you can kind of be so scared. I think so many individuals, and I think you can also see it maybe at a corporate level too, of being scared to say the wrong thing. And I think especially in this kind of, the cancel culture, we've all kind of seen through and through of when things are coming off more performative or are performative, right? But it's about kind of how do we get it right? And I'm curious too, from your perspectives, how you've maybe gotten through that, like getting to the process and getting to the making steps and making actions without the worry of perfection and getting it right, as opposed to being right part of it. How have you seen that play out in each of your roles or in your companies?
It's definitely always there. And I think that mindset of progress and that collective mind, to make sure that we're sharing that, and we're, as a company, as a team, and as a leader, you're actually sharing that it's okay. Like it's important to take that first step. It's okay if it's not perfect, and actually acknowledging, and, going back to vulnerability, even as a leader, I'm going to make mistakes, and this is a space that it's okay to make mistakes in, but like let's open and create that safe space. That's what it is, in order to do that, move forward.
And doing what you can ahead of time, right? To have the knowledge to try to get it as close to right as you can before taking, you're not recklessly going into this, right? It's, what are the things you're doing ahead of time to kind of research and prepare yourself to make that right first step too, which I think is important as well. But Dion, go ahead with what you're going to say.
Well said. It's about a culture. It's about creating that environment and that culture to have a safe space to embark on that. And as you said, not going into it recklessly, to seek the information and the knowledge ahead of time. I love that actually what the employee resource groups have always been intended to do in our company are now being utilized more and more. And it's that DNA is actually becoming known in, just yesterday we had an experience, an opportunity to help influence packaging design in something we're doing in consumer products. And I reached out to our employee resource group to get some information. We want to gain the knowledge and make sure to take the population that we know could help us make a better decision, utilize that group. That's what they should be, as a resource within the company to help make that decision and inform before kind of jumping in and doing something recklessly and too quickly. Right. Yeah.
And I think that's a really important distinction to mention, and where they overlap of, what the allyship and inclusivity and all of this in this conversation is doing to the products and the product of a business, and what we're producing as employees, but also the culture and the environment that we're creating for employees in the workplace. And I think the conversation can kind of go one or the other of, inclusion makes the product better in ways, but also it makes the workplace better in ways. But I think, just as the example you just shared of where those can interweave and interact, I think is a really interesting place to kind of identify where allyship and where all of this connects. So I appreciate that story too. Bisma, is there anything kind of in that area that you want to mention about?
No, I think just jump like on the same ERG idea or model, where we're at actually leveraging the strengths and the perspectives from the ERG teams is actually also connecting purpose to what they do like we're making the product and the purpose connect, which it makes the teams also feel more empowered, engaged to do what they're doing. So it's good for business, it's good for individuals, it's good for teams. It's just like why haven't we been doing more of this all along kind of statement.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, any other last kind of thoughts before we close up this part, and we're going to bring everybody back together on the segment? Dion, go ahead.
I think I was just going to add, one of the things that I'm really proud that our leader of our consumer products business, Pam Kaufman, has done is take the action and organize us into pillars of focus. And so we have 4 pillars in the D&I space that we're focused on around the people and culture, then the partners that we look at, then products, and then industry. And as we've mobilized around those pillars and taken action steps and measurability, right? We've always had this DE&I, we've had it as a focus in our culture, but now we're measuring. This structure has given us the opportunity to really focus in on these areas. And as you were saying, now translate to real action in product for the consumer and in the right partners and in the industry conversations and our own makeup. So that's the last thing I was going to say is it takes a leader to also mobilize a team and walk the talk, live it every day, and make sure that it's important. And it's not just a moment that we treat it as a movement that continues forward.
Absolutely.
And Shannon, just in I guess last thought also, and jumping on the leadership idea, and point is it's our responsibility. Also, I think it starts with us to demonstrate that leadership within the teams. So it's we talked about small acts, and even as leaders, the small acts are so important because it creates that safe space. It's about that time in a meeting where somebody's trying to say something, where they're not really feeling comfortable, and inviting them to speak up, to accepting feedback and learning from it and sharing your moment of vulnerability in it. I think that's, for me, it's a really big important of demonstrating with the teams that, work with us, that they need to see us doing it so that they, then it's how we can and should and will function.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm glad you both brought up the leadership component too, because I think it's also not, it's about the leaders at the highest levels, but it's also about the leadership that each of us carry in the rooms that we're in and as individuals. Because, when in the video, and we talk about the kind of definition of allyship is around, how and where we hold privilege and power against other groups. And so where can, it's not just about, there's so many different aspects to that and where privilege happens. And so much privilege can also come from leadership and the roles that we have and the place that we hold in a room, but being observant of kind of where we can practice allyship in those actions of recognizing somebody's not speaking up or doesn't have a chance to, or whatever that might be, that is a part of being an ally as a leader and the power that we have in those rooms as leaders. But then also, I think, Dion, to your point too, of the leadership at the highest level, setting that standard of what values and what impact we want to have as an organization really kind of sets the tone for the progress that everyone is making over time. So I appreciate both of your kind of comments and thoughts on that, and on just kind of how allyship really plays a role in our workplaces, from both that kind of as employees and the people we work with in the workplaces and in cultures and environments that we're in, but also then in the kind of trickle through of where that comes to the work that we produce as well. So appreciate both of your comments and for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And and then we'll invite everybody back on. And I know in the chat, we've seen a lot of really amazing questions and comments and thoughts. But yeah, I want to invite all of our speakers back on just as a thank you first of everyone being a part of this conversation and, really leaning into everything that we've been talking about. But also if there's more questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box, everyone who's listening, or in the chat, and we'll have a few minutes here. Not many. I know we're coming up to the end, but I know there was a question around that was really interesting around hiring. And I know, Sascha, you mentioned hiring at the beginning, but Dion, Bisma, I know that kind of falls into the corporate aspect too, but curious around like hiring managers and looking at where we've been able to kind of widen the net when it comes to hiring in your different organizations, or where you've seen kind of success in that. Would love to hear some thoughts there before we wrap.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's certainly sort of a short-term plan, and then there's a longer-term plan. And part of the longer-term play, of course, is reaching out to different communities at younger ages. We appreciate by the time you're already coming to us and you're usually a little bit more established in your career, or perhaps you've already graduated from a program, that even that doesn't necessarily reflect always the diversity that we would like to see. So by starting different things like scholarship programs, or getting involved with extracurricular or even different STEM organizations for our younger individuals to help try to shape the notion that, of course, you can go into any career path you want. And if we're able to help in even at that stage, I think that's impactful. And of course, the more immediate thought is again, where we reach out. It's not as simple as just sitting and waiting for inbound applicants. Like, how can we be more proactive in reaching out to different groups, organizations that reflect, again, the diversity we hope to see, and we build partnerships, meaningful partnerships with those individuals and with those groups as well.
Absolutely. And I think so much of it is around recognizing the need for it too. And I think the comment in the chat was around when you see that your hiring pool looks just like all the people that already work for you, right? And observing that and recognizing that, and then taking the actions and the steps, like you mentioned, to make that different, I think is a really important part of that process as well.
There's an interesting thought about, most organizations have referral programs, for example, good people know good people, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, the referral program often, again, produces a lot of individuals who reflect the similar, diversity that we currently see. So, it's finding a line between both.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'll just add that I think, we all need to change our circles and challenge ourselves to change our circles. And I'll agree, with Stephen, and he mentioned earlier, my buddy Stephen, there's no excuse for any company to sort of sit back and say, I can't find people, I can't find talent that's diverse and so forth. No, it's about actually making the extra step to change our circles and be exposed to different groups and seeking out it. We've had some great training in this. There are some great training programs now around the familiarity trap that we all fall into, right? And how to fix that and change that to say, we all have to figure out how we are tapping into new rooms and meeting people proactively.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, again, thank you all so much for being a part of this really important conversation. And it definitely does not end here. I think this is something that we, at WiT are really making a big part of our programming as we're planning out for 2022, and just in everything that we do, really kind of centering how we can be inclusive in all of the gatherings that we have and the programs that we create, and just making it a place where people can find each other and find allies, but also learn and explore and not have it perfect. And that's so important to us too. So we, again, appreciate everyone for joining and leaning into this conversation so much. And I'll make sure, I think Janice is coming back on here as well to kind of share some final thoughts. But again, just thank you all so much for the conversation, but also for all the work that you're doing in your own spheres and with the people that you're allies to, and the ways that you're really moving the needle when it comes to this in our industry. So we appreciate all of you so much. Thank you.
Shannon, can you enable video for me?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I just wanted to thank everybody, myself too.
Yeah, thank you, Janice.
Our little technical stuff, which is awesome. Great.
Yeah, you're good.
There we go. Okay, great.
Yeah.
First of all, Shannon, thank you so much. You had done an amazing job leading our great speakers, and I think what for me felt like an incredibly authentic conversation, and also for being a part of this journey around allyship in our industry. I think it is a journey. I really encourage everyone to make a difference, to take steps and to be active. There were so many takeaways. I have lots of notes myself. I know we'll be sharing out more resources, but you all of our speakers shared so generously. So I thank you for that. There was a lot of really great information. I also, as Shannon, you mentioned, we're continuing our programming. This is important. These are important conversations we're having. We have a fireside chat on December 7th with a best-selling author, Minda Harts, about inclusivity in the workplace. So our conversations do continue. We really ask that you join us and participate. We all have our individual, impact that we can have. So it's each and every one of ours responsibility. So with that, I'm wishing everyone an incredibly wonderful Thanksgiving, much health and happiness to everybody. And thank you again for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks all.
Thank you.